The Grand Conclave of the Cathar Confederacy was a place of crushing silence, a silence designed to amplify the weight of history. Its walls were hewn from the fossilized heart of a leviathan that had swum the gas seas of their primordial world, and they rose so high that their apex was lost in an engineered gloom, where captured nebulae swirled in a slow, eternal dance. Light, what little there was, emanated from the polished obsidian floor, casting long, skeletal shadows of the figures assembled in the central amphitheater. Here judgment was rendered, futures were decided, and for the first time in 10,000 cycles, the absolute, unshakable certainty of the Cathar had been shattered. At the center of this suffocating grandeur stood Grand Marshal Vorlag, his ceremonial armor, once a symbol of unvanquished might, now feeling like a cage of shame. Every chiseled glyph that told the story of his lineage, of 1,000 glorious conquests across 100 star systems, seemed to mock him. The eyes of the High Elders, seated in their obsidian thrones upon the dais, were fixed upon him, their multifaceted lenses unblinking, reflecting the cold, ambient light like a constellation of accusing stars. "Explain it again, Grand Marshal." High Elder Kalen's voice resonated through the chamber, not with anger, but with a deep, chilling weariness that was far worse. His voice was the sound of a glacier cracking, ancient and inexorable. "Recount the logic of your failure. We have reviewed the data streams, the battle logs, the final, frantic transmissions from the front. They are incoherent. They speak of a battle that was not a battle, of a victory that was not a victory. They speak of an enemy that did not fight." Vorlag's mandibles tightened, a subtle click in the profound quiet. His gaze was fixed on the holographic display shimmering in the air before him, a tactical map of the Seraphina Nebula, the site of their utter humiliation. On one side, a swarm of brilliant crimson icons, so numerous they resembled a blood tide, represented the Cathar Armada. Their formation was perfect, a demonstration of geometric and strategic flawlessness honed over millennia of warfare. On the other side, scattered like carelessly thrown dust, were the faint blue icons of the human fleet. The disparity was not just tactical, it was existential, a force of nature against a momentary anomaly. "They were a new species, High Elders," Vorlag began, his voice a low rasp, each word scraped from a throat dry with disgrace. "Discovered at the edge of the Perseus Arm. Their expansion was chaotic, illogical. They did not move in coordinated waves of colonization, as is the natural order. They sent out single ships, small outposts, disparate communities that did not seem to answer to a unified will. Our initial threat assessment classified them as disorganized primitives, barely a Tier 1 civilization, their technological signatures a disharmonious symphony of competing principles." He paused, letting the memory surface, the sheer arrogance of it. The Confederacy had encountered countless species in its long ascent to galactic dominance. The process was always the same: a display of overwhelming force, an offer of assimilation into the collective will of the Cathar, and for those who refused, a swift, methodical erasure. It was not cruelty, it was order. It was the benevolent pruning of a chaotic galaxy, bringing all things into a harmonious, singular purpose. Humans, with their cacophony of languages, their warring ideologies, their baffling reverence for the individual over the whole, were the very definition of a weed in the galactic garden. "We issued the standard edict," Vorlag continued, the words tasting like ash. "Submit to the Confederacy's guidance, accept the unity of the will and be elevated, or resist and be cleansed. It is the same choice we have offered to all. It is the only choice." "And their response?" another Elder Thrax inquired. His voice was sharper, younger, carrying the edge of analytical curiosity that had not yet been dulled by eons of certainty. "The archives show their reply was atypical." Vorlag's gaze drifted from the tactical map to a memory more vivid, more unsettling. He had been on the bridge of his flagship, the Will Unbroken Asterisk, a vessel the size of a small moon, the pinnacle of Cathar engineering. The human emissary had appeared on the main view screen, a single soft-skinned being in a simple, dark uniform. There was no throne, no honor guard, no display of power. The being simply stood in a stark white room. It did not project fear. It did not project defiance. It projected an unnerving, profound calm. "They did not threaten," Vorlag said, his voice dropping lower. "They did not plead. They asked questions. They asked us to define unity. They asked us to explain the value of a collective will if it was achieved through the erasure of that which was collected. They spoke of philosophy, of art, of concepts we deemed irrelevant, the sentimental detritus of a species not yet evolved enough to shed its individual vanities. We dismissed it as a delaying tactic, a sign of their weakness and their inability to comprehend the honor we were offering them." The memory was so clear. The human's name was Ambassador Rostova. Her face was an unreadable mask of placid flesh, but her eyes held a depth that Vorlag had mistaken for primitive fear. Now in the suffocating silence of the conclave, he knew it had been something else entirely. Pity. "We advanced," Vorlag stated, his voice regaining a sliver of its old command, the ingrained instinct of a marshal reporting a campaign. "Our fleets blotted out their sun. Our numbers were an irrefutable argument, a physical manifestation of our superior logic and destiny. We anticipated a desperate, futile charge. We anticipated disorganized volleys of primitive kinetic or energy weapons. We were prepared for their surrender or their annihilation. We were prepared for anything except what they did." The crimson icons on the map pulsed. The blue icons remained scattered, unmoving. "They did nothing," Vorlag said, the two words falling into the chamber like stones into a bottomless well. "As our forward strike wings entered their weapons range, as our grand cruisers prepared the system-cleansing energies, they did nothing. They simply waited." Their ships, a grotesque menagerie of asymmetrical designs, held their positions, and then they broadcasted. High Elder Kalen leaned forward, his ancient carapace creaking. "A signal, a weaponized frequency, a viral code." Vorlag shook his massive head slowly. The gesture felt alien to him, a motion of uncertainty he had not made since he was a larval grub. "No, it was not an attack, not in any way we understand the term. It was a transmission. A wave of pure information directed not at our ship systems but at us, at our minds." A murmur, a subtle shift of armored bodies, rippled through the amphitheater. The Cathar were a psionically attuned species, their collective will a low-level telepathic field that connected them all, allowing for perfect coordination, perfect unity. It was the bedrock of their civilization, the source of their strength. An attack on the mind was conceivable, but what Vorlag described was something else. He remembered the moment it hit the bridge of the will unbroken asterisk. There was no sound, no explosion. It was a wave of sensation. It was the feeling of cold rain on exposed skin, a sensation no Cathar with their hardened exoskeletons had ever experienced. It was the smell of burning wood and the taste of something called salt, sharp and biting on a phantom tongue. It was a chaotic, overwhelming torrent of sensory data that had no context in the Cathar mind. And then came the emotions. "It was a storm," Vorlag whispered, the memory threatening to overwhelm him. "A hurricane of feeling but fractured, individualized. The fierce, illogical protectiveness of a parent for a single, insignificant offspring. The crushing, soul-hollowing grief of personal loss. The dizzying, irrational joy of a piece of music. The profound loneliness of a single being staring into a star-filled sky, contemplating its own mortality." He gestured to the silent, static tactical map. "My helmsman, a veteran of 100 campaigns, a being of perfect discipline, he simply let go of the controls. He was lost in a memory that was not his, weeping for a creature called a dog that had died. My weapons officer, whose lineage had served the fleet for generations, saw a vision of a sunset over an ocean of liquid water, and he refused to fire. He said it was beautiful. A word for which we have no precise translation, a concept we have no need for." The silence in the conclave was now absolute. The swirling nebulae above seemed to freeze. The elders on the dais were statues of obsidian and dread. "It swept through the entire fleet in an instant," Vorlag's voice cracked. "Perfect unity, shattered into a billion points of individual agony and wonder. The collective will, our greatest strength, became our greatest vulnerability. The psychic link that bound us together became a conduit for a poison we could not comprehend. The poison of I." He looked up at the elders, his own multifaceted eyes mirroring their horror. "Captains refused orders, not out of mutiny, but out of philosophical crisis. Crews lay paralyzed at their stations, lost in the memories of 1,000 different human lives. Some went mad, their minds unable to reconcile our ordered reality with the beautiful, terrible chaos of human experience. Ships drifted, formations broke. The Armada, the most powerful force this galaxy has ever seen, was rendered inert, not by a weapon, but by a song, by a story, by the unfiltered essence of what it meant to be human. We lost everything," he said, his voice finally breaking, the full weight of the admission rashing down upon him. "Not just our ships, which now drift silently in that nebula, their crews lost in a dream from which they cannot wake. We lost our purpose, our certainty, the very foundation of our reality. They did not conquer our territory, they conquered our souls." He fell silent. The tactical map shimmered and vanished, leaving only the Grand Marshal, a broken soldier in a silent tomb, standing before his judges. The question hung in the vast, cold air of the conclave. It was not, how did we lose to a weaker foe? It was something far more terrifying. It was, what are we if the very thing we defined as weakness is a power capable of unmaking us completely? The humans hadn't just defeated the Cathar Armada. They had shattered the Cathar idea of existence itself, and in the ruins of that idea, a terrifying new galaxy was taking shape. For days, the conclave remained in session, a silent, paralyzed council of ghosts. The initial shock had receded, replaced by a deep existential dread that was entirely alien to the Cathar psyche. Fear was a tool, a motivator for lesser species. For the Cathar, there had only ever been the serene, implacable march of destiny. Now, destiny was a meaningless word. Vorlag remained at the center of the chamber, a living monument to their failure. He neither ate nor slept, his mind replaying the cascade of alien sensations, trying to find the logic within the chaos, the strategy within the madness. He dissected the human broadcast, which his mind had recorded with perfect fidelity. He experienced the birth of a human child, seen through the exhausted, tear-filled eyes of its mother, an explosion of love so fierce and singular it defied all Cathar understanding of communal propagation. He felt the quiet satisfaction of an old man planting a tree he would never see grow to maturity, an act of faith in a future he was not a part of. He endured the searing rage of injustice, the bitter sting of betrayal, the quiet ache of solitude. Each sensation was a universe unto itself, a complete and total existence. The Cathar lived as a we. The humans, he was beginning to understand, lived as a galaxy of I-S, each one a star of blinding and often destructive intensity. It was Thrax, the young, analytical elder, who finally broke the stasis. His throne projected a new holographic display into the center of the chamber. It was not a star chart, but a complex, shifting latticework of neurological patterns. "I have been analyzing the residual psychic resonance from the fleet," Thrax announced, his voice steady but laced with a new, unsettling humility. "What the Grand Marshal describes is not just a broadcast. It is a form of conceptual engineering. It is not a weapon designed to kill, but a key designed to unlock. Our collective will, the psychic field that unifies us, is a closed system. It reinforces our beliefs, our logic, our singular purpose. It is an echo chamber of the soul. The humans did not break it, they opened it." The latticework pulsed. A new set of patterns, wild, asymmetrical, and vibrant, began to interlace with the rigid, geometric Cathar patterns. "They introduced novel stimuli," Thrax explained. "Experiences and emotions so fundamentally alien to our own that our consciousness had no framework to process them. Faced with this impossible data, the individual mind retreats from the collective to try and make sense of it. This retreat, happening simultaneously across trillions of minds, caused the collapse of the will. They used empathy as a weapon. They forced us to feel what they feel, to see the universe through their eyes. They have contaminated us," High Elder Kalen hissed, the first spark of anger he had shown. "They have infected us with their chaotic individualism. This is a plague of the mind." "Or a cure for a sickness we did not know we had," Thrax countered, his words a shocking heresy. The other elders stirred, their collective gaze shifting to Thrax with cold disapproval. "For 10,000 cycles, we have not evolved, we have not changed. We have only expanded, replicating the same perfect pattern across the stars. We call it order. The humans might call it stagnation. They did not destroy our fleet because they were stronger. They neutralized it because they were more complex. Their strength is not in unity, but in diversity. Every human mind is a unique algorithm capable of novel solutions. Our entire species is but one algorithm repeated ad infinitum." Before Kalen could retort, a new signal registered in the conclave, an alert that had not sounded in millennia. A communication request from a human vessel. A single human vessel that had just entered their home system unescorted, its shields down, its weapons ports visibly sealed. It was an act of either supreme arrogance or absolute faith. The conclave descended into a tense, fragmented debate. Some called for the ship's immediate destruction, a futile act of defiance. Others argued for caution, fearing another, more permanent form of the psychic attack. It was Vorlag, the disgraced marshal, who silenced them. "Let them speak," he said, his voice raw but firm. "They have already defeated us. Annihilating this ship will not change that. It will only prove that we have learned nothing. We fought them with force, and they answered with understanding. Perhaps it is time we tried to understand as well." A heavy consensus settled over the chamber. The request was accepted. The main holographic display, once home to the map of their defeat, now flickered to life, showing the interior of the human ship's bridge. It was the same stark, white room from the initial emissary's message, and in the center of it stood the same being, Ambassador Eva Rostova. She looked exactly as she had before the conflict, her expression one of serene composure. Behind her, through a viewport, the immense, terrifying sphere of the Cathar homeworld was visible, a symbol of a power that was now just a memory. "High Elders of the Cathar Confederacy," she began, her voice calm, devoid of triumph or condescension. It was translated instantly by their systems, yet the nuances, the sheer individuality of its tone were unsettling. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Terran Alliance. I come in peace." "Peace," High Elder Kalen's voice boomed, dripping with scorn. "You have shattered our civilization. You have broken the minds of our soldiers. You have committed an act of war more insidious than any we have ever encountered. You call this peace?" The ambassador's expression did not change, but a profound sadness entered her eyes, a reflection of the grief Vorlag had experienced from the broadcast. "We did not seek conflict. We sought communication. We showed you our ultimatum, the same one you offered us: assimilate or be destroyed. We chose a third option, to be understood." She gestured subtly, and the view behind her changed. It became a simulation, showing the Cathar Armada and the small human fleet. "Your tactical doctrine is flawless, Grand Marshal Vorlag. It is based on overwhelming force, perfect coordination, and the complete negation of an enemy's ability to fight. We analyzed it. We knew we could not defeat you in a conventional battle. To even try would have resulted in our annihilation and the deaths of trillions of your soldiers. We found that outcome unacceptable." Unacceptable. The Cathar did not think in those terms. A soldier's life was a resource, willingly expended for the good of the whole. The idea of an enemy valuing the lives of its foes was so alien it bordered on insanity. "So you chose to lobotomize them instead?" Thrax interjected, his tone purely analytical. "No," Rostova replied, meeting his gaze through the holographic interface. "We chose to show them why we value life. We knew your strength was your collective consciousness, a singular perspective that has served you well. But a single perspective, no matter how powerful, is also a single point of failure. We did not transmit a weapon. We transmitted a library. We gave you the collected experiences, the art, the music, the philosophies, the joys and sorrows of a billion individual lives. We called it the chorus. It was not meant to break you. It was meant to broaden you, to show you that there are other ways to exist besides the one you have chosen." Vorlag stepped forward, his massive form eclipsing the view of the elders behind him. He felt a strange connection to this small, soft being. She spoke of strategy, but her goals were not tactical, they were philosophical. "Why?" Vorlag asked, the single word carrying the weight of his entire shattered worldview. "Why would you do this? Why not flee? Why not fight and die with what you call honor? Because the galaxy is too large and too full of wonders to be the sole property of a single idea," Rostova said, her voice softening with an emotion that felt like reverence. "And because we knew that if we fought you, even if we had somehow won through sheer attrition, we would have become more like you. We would have had to sacrifice our own diversity, our own individuality, to create a war machine capable of matching yours. We would have had to become a singular, unified will, and in that victory we would have lost everything we were fighting to protect." The words echoed Vorag's own declaration in the conclave, but they were inverted, given a meaning so profound it made his carapace ache. The humans had not fought to win. They had refused to fight in order to not lose themselves. It was a strategic logic so advanced, so fundamentally superior, that it made the Cathar's millennia of conquest seem like the tantrum of a child. "We did not fire a single shot," Rostova continued. "Not one Cathar life was taken by our hand. We understand that what we did has caused disruption, pain, confusion. The transition from a collective to a society of individuals will be the greatest challenge you have ever faced, and we are here to help." The offer hung in the silent chamber, a concept as shocking as the attack itself. Help, not subjugation, not exploitation, partnership. "You would help us?" Thrax asked, his skepticism clear. "Why, what do you gain?" Rostova's gaze seemed to pierce through the holographic display, looking not just at them, but at the swirling nebulae on the conclave ceiling, at the stars beyond. "Because we believe that a galaxy of 1,000,000,000,000 different voices is stronger than a galaxy with only one. We believe your logic, your discipline, your history, when tempered with the value of the individual, could create a civilization greater than either of us could build alone. And because in the grand scheme of things our conflict is insignificant." She paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. "We did this to you. We took this desperate, terrible risk because we had no time. There is a greater threat, a reason why we cannot afford to be fighting amongst ourselves." The ambassador raised her hand, and the display shifted again. It was no longer the bridge of her ship or a tactical simulation. It was a map of the entire galaxy. A slow, rhythmic pulse was emanating from the void between the galaxies, a wave of something that was sweeping across the starscape. It was faint, almost undetectable, but it was there. "We have studied the deep cosmic record," Rostova said, her voice now grim, stripped of all its diplomatic softness. "We have looked into the silence between the stars. The universe is much older than either of us have known. We are not the first intelligences to rise. We are merely the latest in a long, repeating cycle. There have been countless empires, countless federations that reached the stars, and they are all gone. The Great Silence, as we call it, is not a natural state. It is an imposed one. She pointed to the pulsing wave on the map. We do not know what it is, a force of nature, the weapon of an ancient, transcendent power, a cosmic immune system. We call it the filter. It is a recurring, cyclical phenomenon, and it targets civilizations based on a very specific set of criteria: rapid, aggressive, loud expansion. It targets species that scream their existence into the void through conquest, through warfare, through the building of monolithic, homogeneous empires that prioritize growth above all else. It targets civilizations like yours was. A cold that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature seeped into Vorlag's very being. He looked at the map, at the history of his people's glorious, unending conquest, and saw it for what it truly was: a beacon, a signal fire, attracting an unseeable, unknowable doom. Your confederacy was on the verge of becoming too visible, Rostova stated quietly. Too uniform, too much of a single, predictable pattern. You were painting a target on this entire sector of the galaxy. If we had fought a conventional war, the energy expenditure, the sheer violence would have accelerated that process. We would have both been wiped from existence, just another silent ruin for a future species to puzzle over. The truth was a physical blow. The humans' strange, passive, conceptual attack had not been an act of war against the Cathar. It had been an act of galactic preservation. They had not destroyed the Cathar Empire to defeat it. They had destroyed it to save the Cathar from themselves and from a threat they were too arrogant to even see. Our choice was to let you be erased by the filter taking us with you, Rostova concluded, or to force you to change, to become quieter, more diverse, more alive. We chose the path that led to survival for both of us. The cost was your empire, the prize is a future. The holographic display shut off, leaving the Cathar alone once more in their silent, grand chamber. But the silence was different now. It was no longer the silence of shame or confusion. It was the silence of awe. The silence of a mind staring into an abyss so vast that its own existence seems a fragile, precious miracle. Vorlag looked at the High Elders. Their rigid postures had softened. The unblinking certainty in their eyes had been replaced by a flickering, uncertain light. He saw not the monolithic will of the Cathar, but a collection of individuals, each one grappling with a revelation that had shattered a 10,000-year-old reality. He felt the phantom echo of the chorus in his mind, not as a weapon, but as a key. The grief of a human widower, the fierce joy of a scientist making a discovery, the quiet courage of a lone explorer stepping onto an alien world. These were not weaknesses. They were colors in a spectrum he had never known existed. He slowly, deliberately reached up and unclasped his helmet. The air of the conclave, recycled and sterile for millennia, felt new on his exposed head. He looked at his fellow Cathar, truly looked at them for the first time. He saw the subtle tremor in Th. Rax's mandible, the deep weariness in Kalen's posture. He saw individuals. He saw his people. Turning to the empty space where the ambassador's image had been, he spoke, his voice clear and resonant, no longer the rasp of a disgraced marshal, but the firm tone of a leader facing a new dawn. We outnumbered them, he said, the words of the old lament now imbued with a new, profound meaning. We outnumbered them by 100 to 1, and we lost everything. Paused, letting the truth of it settle in the transformed silence. And it is the greatest victory in the history of our people. Outside the conclave, the world of the Cathar was in chaos. The old certainties were gone. The unifying will was a fractured whisper. But it was not the end, it was a beginning. A painful, terrifying, and brilliant beginning. And in the silent space between the galaxies, the filter continued its slow, patient sweep, forever searching for the loud, the arrogant, the unchanging. And for the first time, it would pass by this small corner of the galaxy, finding not the monotonous roar of a single, marching empire, but the quiet, complex, and resilient murmur of a billion different voices, learning to sing in harmony. The war was over. The struggle for survival had just begun.